Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. So one of my top light bulb moments was when I first started asking other photographers for their opinion on some of my favorite photos. And I remember I used to only bounce photos off my wife to get feedback. And her being the supportive person that she has always said the same thing, which was really some iteration of either it's amazing or it's one of your best, bravo, which feels good, but doesn't really give me much to go off of or improve upon. So last week in the Blaze, which is my monthly photography newsletter, I asked you all to send in some of your favorite photos to participate in a photo review episode, which absolutely crushed my email. We had almost 1,000 photos submitted in the first 24 hours, which was just absolutely incredible. So thank you for that response. And in this video, I'm going to briefly review as many of them as I possibly can in order to provide some feedback that can hopefully benefit everyone who is watching. And a real quick disclaimer here, my opinion is certainly not factual information. It's not right, it's not wrong, it is simply just an opinion. So to jump right into it, this is the very first photo I chose, which I absolutely love. It checks off all the boxes of the things that I like in a good landscape photo. I would crop this a little bit differently though if it was my photograph. So I'm gonna come over here. Let's do, maybe 8.5 by 11. Just kind of bring this over a little bit here, close this down and clean that up pretty easily there. What I'm gonna do is come up here to mask, do a linear gradient, just kind of drag it right across the foreground here. I'll show you why I'm doing this in just a moment. Just gonna put it on a slight angle, reduce the exposure here a fair amount, maybe there. Bring up mask again, one more mask, radial gradient this time. Drag this one right through here, put it on a slight angle, kind of bring it down, kind of position it over here along this turn of the path and the structure right here. And then let's bring up the exposure here a bit. We bring up the shadows just a little bit as well. We could add a little bit of negative dehaze just to kind of soften that area up just a little bit. Gonna bring the highlights down a touch here as well. Let's go back to the global section, basics. I'm just gonna reduce the overall clarity of this photograph just a little bit, bring up the texture just a touch. Now it doesn't look like I did a whole lot to this photograph, but what I did, in my opinion, is really change the I guess the overall depth in the photograph, because when I saw it originally, you'll see it in just a second, the luminosity in the foreground and the background, it was kind of flipped from what I normally like to do with my photos. So this is where it started here. You can see that the foreground is much brighter, and then the turn right through here, these trees, and then the structure on the right is all darker than the foreground. And now I just kind of flipped it the other way around, and I think it creates a little bit more depth. So this is the way I have it now. So as I rock this back and forth, this is the way it was before and after, before and after. And I like the depth that this creates. The foreground is a little bit darker. It becomes a little bit brighter. This area is a little bit brighter. I would probably also come over here to the effects section and add a subtle vignette to the overall photograph. And this is before and after, before and after. Absolutely beautiful image though. I really, really do like this one. Now, I do want to say something real quick because I already can feel myself doing it. I mentioned this in a video a couple weeks ago that I always feel a ton of pressure to try and cram as much value in these videos as I possibly can in as short amount of time as I possibly can. And I can already feel myself getting a little bit anxious and trying to rush through this. So I'm gonna slow things down a little bit. But this will be a longer video. I hope that is okay, and I hope you all still enjoy it. Now this photo here, there isn't really much I would do differently with the overall edit of this photograph, just a compositional change. I feel like, and of course I've never been to this location, but I feel like if you moved over to the right just a little bit, you could have positioned it to where this tree right here was not intersecting with this area here. So the hole in the red rock or the arch would be completely clear. I think that would make a little bit cleaner of a composition. I don't think there's anything you could do about this area sticking above this line here. So I don't think there's anything there that could be done, but this branch here, how it's just kind of intersecting the exact top portion of the red rock here, I think you could put, if you moved over to kind of clear this area out, you could also kind of get this area where it was either completely above or completely below, but not just kind of running right along that ridge line. I think those two very small compositional changes could have just made this a little bit cleaner of a composition. But overall, beautiful photograph. Now this one here, this is probably the image that I played around with the most because there's actually two different ways that I would do this. And this is the first one right here. I would come up here to the crop, original 4x5. If you hit the shortcut key X, it puts it in a vertical orientation, and hit close. Now, I do like this. I feel like it's a little bit more focused. The sun here, I think I'm gonna go ahead and just make a quick change there just to kind of soften that area up just a little bit. Radial gradient across the sun to about maybe right like that. I want the feather to be at 100. I'm gonna bring the clarity down a lot, or bring the texture down a lot, because ultimately what I'm trying to do is just get rid of that perfectly circular line of the sun. Because if you were to look at the sun, you're not gonna see it perfectly circular like that. You're gonna see just kind of an extremely bright glow of the sun. So I want to go ahead and mimic that. Maybe even bring down a little bit of the haze just to kind of create that atmospheric glow, and you can see what that's doing right there. The area around the sun's getting a little bit white, so I'm just going to bring up the warmth just a little bit as well. And sometimes if you just kind of rock the contrast back and forth, you can see what that's doing as well. So maybe about just right there looks pretty good. Let's toggle this on and off just to see what we did. That's where it was before, after, before, and after. So a subtle change, but I think it definitely looks good. So that is one way I would do it. I would also actually come over here and just kind of reduce the overall temperature of this photograph. I think it's a little bit too warm. So there's something maybe about right there I think is looking pretty good. Let's just hit auto and see what Lightroom thinks it should be. Yeah, I don't think it should be quite like that, but maybe somewhere around here I think looks pretty good. Now the other option would be just to crop the sun completely out, and I think that that also looks really good as well. So if I come up here to crop, and just kind of simply bring this down to that area there, I think that that is looking pretty good right there as well. So this is before and after, before and after. I think this is just a good example of really just focusing on the area of the photograph that you like the best, because when it was in its, well, let me go back real quick to, let's just hit reset. This right here, it's beautiful, but there's just so much of it, so much of it. And I think just kind of really drilling down into the things that you love most about the photograph, a lot of times just creates a more focused image. Now this image here, this is a great example of just photographing in, I'm assuming this is midday light, harsher light, beautiful scene, nice composition, but the light is just kind of, in my opinion, really ruining this photograph. But it's very simple to resolve this here. So if you see this area of the histogram, there's a ton of mid-tone information right through here. So what I like to do is I would come down here to the color grading section, make sure midtones are selected, which they are right here, and then take luminance, and you can impact that. If you look at the histogram at the top, when I bring luminance back and forth, it's really only impacting the midtone section. So I'm gonna bring this all the way down here, and then I'm gonna come over here to color mixer, and I'm gonna reduce the saturation of the blue channel just so it's not so blue. So I'm gonna bring this down a fair amount to maybe about right there. And now I'm gonna come up to the basic section, just reduce the overall exposure. I'm gonna bring the highlights down a little bit as well. Maybe bring the shadows up just a little bit more. Maybe even bring the white point down just a touch there. And if I toggle this on and off, this is where it started here, which it looks very, very harsh light. It's not super appealing light. And I feel like this right here is a little bit softer of a light. So I think that that is a very simple change, but something that can really be applied to any scenario where you're photographing in harsh light. So using the mid-tone section of the color grading section is a great way to do just that. Now this is one of my favorite photographs that was submitted. I love the overall simplicity of this. The only thing that I would do differently is just crop this differently. So crop here, I'm just gonna bring this bottom right side over to about here. I really like this area of the scene, so I wanna make sure that I keep that. And I think I'm gonna bring this over here just a little bit to something about right here. I really just wanna get the cabin. I don't want it to be directly in the center of the photograph, and I'm trying to just kind of bring the crop in a little bit tighter because I want to be able to see that cabin a little bit more. I want to see the snow, how it's just completely encapsulating this cabin just a little bit more. And just by creating a slightly more focused, or slightly more focused, I guess crop is what I'm trying to say, you can see a little bit more of the detail of this house. But this is absolutely beautiful photograph. I absolutely love this one. Now this right here, now obviously if you've watched this channel for any amount of time at all, you know that I am not a street photographer, but I think this is another good example of using luminosity or brightness values to create a little bit of depth in a photograph. So this one is very similar to the very first photo that we edited. So I'm going to come up here to masks, and I'm going to create a radial gradient. I'm going to put it right across this foreground area. I'm going to bring it all the way down here to the midpoint of the image and just kind of drag it up just a little bit to about right here. I want the feather to be right around 75 probably. And then let's just bring down the overall exposure of this area here. I'm going to bring it down quite a bit. And then let's create one more mask. We're going to do a radial gradient again, but this time I'm going to drag it across this area here in the background and drag it all the way over here like this. Bring it up a little bit more. And then I'm going to increase the exposure here, maybe even put a little bit of negative dehaze in there just to kind of make it a little glowy there in the background. And let's just toggle both of those on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. I think that linear gradient might be a little bit dark in the foreground, but you see what I'm doing here. I'm ultimately just darkening the foreground just a little bit, brightening up the background just a little bit as well. And that just creates a lot of natural depth. The eye always gravitates towards the brighter part of a photograph. So when that brighter part of the photograph is in the background of the image, it's just a great way to draw the viewer's eye throughout the entire photograph. So let me just close this down real quick and toggle this on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. Now this one is real quick. Now this could be an artistic design choice, an artistic editing choice. So the person who submitted this might be their editing style, but I like the overall composition, a classic scene from Iceland, but I just think that the white balance is a little bit off. So if you just come up here to Lightroom and just hit auto, and let's just see what that did. I think that white balance right there already looks a little bit better. I would probably just bring down this tint just a little bit. I think that this corrected white balance looks better than this right here. But like I said, that could just be that person's artistic choice or the way that they edit their photos. But I would just make that slight white balance change. Now this was an interesting photograph here. I edited this maybe 2 or 3 times already. I couldn't really figure out exactly how I would make this change, but I have a general idea of what I would do with this one here. So first of all, I would make a cropping change. So I would just come up here to crop, and I think 4:5 is exactly what I did, to about right there, just to kind of maybe try and balance this overall photograph up a little bit more. And then I'm going to come down here to color mixer, reduce the saturation of the blues once again to about right there. And then I love the rocks in the foreground, but they're a little bit dark. I think the shadows are a little bit too dark. You can see that in the histogram right through here. So I'm going to come up to mask. I'm going to do a radial gradient. We're going to draw a big radius right around this area here, maybe about right there, and drag it over to about something like that. And I'm just going to bring up the shadows here to about maybe there. Nothing crazy, maybe bring up the exposure just a little bit. I just want to be able to see that beautiful detail in those rocks right there. So something like that I think looks pretty good. I'm going to come down to the calibration section. And I'm just going to bring up the saturation of the blue primary channel just a little bit to maybe about right there. Bring the saturation of the green primary channel up a touch and do the same thing with the red. I just love this kind of technique for editing or for getting fall color to really pop, and you can really see that all through here. If I toggle this on and off, this is before and after, before and after. I think that the blue is now becoming a little bit too blue once again. So I'm just going to bring that blue down just a little bit right there and toggle this edit on and off. So before and after, before and after. And I like that a little bit better. Now, before I do move on with the rest of the photos, I saved my all-time favorite photo that was submitted for the very end. It's absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best images I've seen in quite a while. But I do want to say a big thanks to the longtime sponsor of the channel, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace provides a robust and beautiful online platform to develop your website. You can showcase your photography using Squarespace's professional portfolio designs and display your work using customizable galleries in order to make it your own. And with Squarespace's online store feature, you'll have access to all the tools you'll need to start selling your physical, digital, or service products online immediately. You can even use Squarespace's new asset library so you can upload, organize, and access all your content from a single place in order to easily find and use them across the entire Squarespace platform. platform. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/MarkDenney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. Now, this right here is a classic example of what I find to be a overly kind of crunchy image. So a lot of times when you're taking woodland photographs, there's so much detail in the branches and the leaves and the twigs and in the branches of these trees. And if you use too much clarity or maybe use too much sharpening or use too much texture, there's just so much detail in that photograph, it creates this kind of crunchy or overly sharpened image. So what I would do for this, I'm going to correct the white balance in just a minute. I'm going to bring this clarity down quite a bit. I'm going to bring the texture down quite a bit as well. Maybe even introduce a little bit of negative dehaze just to kind of soften things up a little bit. We can just hit auto here to see what Lightroom has done. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to bring the tint down just a little bit more here. Bring the exposure up just a little bit, while at the same time bringing down the highlights as well. But now I think the photo has a little bit kind of a smoother look to it and just those quick little changes because it just felt too detailed, too sharp, too enhanced for my liking. But if I toggle this on and off, you can see, I don't know how good that comes through on a screen recording like this, but this is before and after, before and after, and I think that made a good difference. But what a beautiful location. I love a bridge like this with the water running through it. It's perfect. Now this right here, this is another one of those photographs where I did maybe 2 or 3 different edits to it, but I like the overall photograph. But when I look at the areas of interest to me, of course, this right here is very, very important to the overall photograph. And I really like the trees in the background, and I like the light hitting the trees in the background as well. But this area on the left side, I think, doesn't add a whole lot. This area on the right side doesn't add a whole lot. So I think that there's a way that you can crop it a little bit different and make the overall composition just a little bit more focused. So I'm going to come up here to the crop tool, drop this down, did a 4x5, hit X to put it in a vertical orientation. And then I'm just kind of lining up this grouping of trees with the center of the frame. And then if I hit return here, I like this much better. But then you have the area in the foreground here where all these rocks are not super interesting. They're kind of half cut in and half cut out of the overall photograph. So I'm just going to kind of bring this up just a little bit. And then going to come down to transform and hit vertical. And I think that looks really good. Just trying to get those trees perfectly straight. Let me adjust this crop now one more time. I think that looks good. If I toggle this on and off, you can see what that has done with the overall scene. And now I'm going to reduce the clarity some, maybe even add a little bit of negative dehaze right through here. Do I want to do anything with the, yeah, oh, I actually think that looks pretty good with the white balance, just a small modification right there. I'm also going to add a radial filter to the background area right through here. Something about like this. Let me bring it down some to about there. Bring that over. I'm going to increase this area here a touch. Bring the highlights down some. A little bit of negative dehaze. Add a little bit of atmospheric glow. Increase the temperature just a little bit. Make this even a little bit brighter. And I'm coming back. I'm going to come down to the global section and it's going to reduce the overall exposure of this photograph just a touch. Now, it doesn't look like we did a whole lot with that radial filter in the background, but when you toggle it on and off, you can really see the difference. Let me come up to the masks. Before and after, before and after. And once again, this is just another example of putting that brightest area of your scene in the background just to draw the viewer's eye through it. And when I toggle the overall edit on and off, you can see what a difference that made along with the crop, because this is the original crop right here. But absolutely beautiful scene. Now this one right here, there really isn't any kind of editing changes I would make to it, but the photograph feels to me a little claustrophobic. You know, there's very little breathing room here for the mountain peak here. There's very little breathing room down here in the reflection. Everything just feels kind of tight, a little bit more claustrophobic. So if I were to photograph this scene, I would just create a little bit more breathing room at the top and the bottom of the scene, maybe even bring the left side over just a little bit, but just kind of give key elements in your scene a little bit more room to breathe and expand a little bit. And that also includes the reflection as well. But overall, very, very nice scene. Now this right here, this is something that is completely outside of what I normally do. But what I would do to this is just a crop modification. This area here, where this the area of the structure kind of swoops down here, and the same thing at the bottom right through here, I find that to be just a little bit distracting. So if I just kind of bring this in to about right here, and I think maybe a small, just kind of straighten it a little bit. Which way? Maybe about like that. And I find that this right here, actually let me bring this in just a little bit more. I think that this right here looks a little bit cleaner. You don't have all of the edges basically are much cleaner now that way. But that's really the only real difference that I would make to that photograph. But that's a beautiful scene. And I found that those edges right there just kind of kept dragging my eye to that area. And you really don't want to drag the viewer's attention to the corners of your photograph. You really want them to be kind of immersed into the center portion of your image. Now this one right here was very, very interesting. Let me come up here to crop and just kind of tighten up this crop just a little bit just to remove that white border. So what I would do here is a linear gradient and linear gradient. I'm going to drag it across the foreground area here to something about like this. And I'm going to reduce the exposure to maybe about right here. And I'm going to do another linear gradient up here. Where are you, linear gradient? For this background area, oops, do it again here. Linear gradient, drag this down to about here. And I just want to reduce the exposure in the background as well. I'm going to come over here to effects. I want to put a slight vignette on this. And I want to toggle these masks on and off because I want you to see this difference here. So this is without the masks and with the masks, without the masks and with the masks. And then I'll toggle the entire edit on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. And the reason I did that is because the brightness value of this entire scene seemed to be very consistent. There was really no interesting light. It was what I would consider to be flat light. But just by darkening the foreground a little bit, darkening the background a little bit, leaving the center area and of course the beautiful tree on the island a little bit brighter, just kind of creates a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interesting light. And it makes that area in the center automatically brighter because we kind of darken every other area of the scene except the center. So that naturally leaves that portion brighter. And I really like the way that this looked, but this is an absolutely gorgeous photograph. I really, really do enjoy it. Now this right here is definitely one of my favorite photographs. I think my number one favorite is next. But this right here, I absolutely love it. I love everything about it. Pretty certain that this is the Oregon coast. The only thing that I would do, and this is getting very, very nitpicky, and it's really just this area here. This reflection of this sea stack is encroaching or touching upon this log sticking out of the sand. And I think with just a very, very minor compositional change, more than likely just raising your camera up just a little bit, maybe angling it down, you'll be able to create just a little bit more separation through there. But like I said, that's getting extremely nitpicky. But I'm always very cognizant of where areas of interest or that areas of interest are not intersecting other areas of interest or not touching other areas of interest. And that right there is the only thing that I've noticed, but I absolutely love all the detail right through here. I love the foreground. I love the sky. I love the way it was edited. Very, very clean. Now this image right here, this is the photograph that I absolutely love. I wouldn't change anything about this image. It is absolutely gorgeous. I like the way that it is edited. I love the fall color, very smooth. The composition is absolutely gorgeous. Everything about this image is just beautiful. I really, really do enjoy it. So that was, I believe, 15 photos. Is there any more? No, that was it. And I'm glad that we ended on that one because that one is absolutely just tremendous. So I do hope that that information was helpful. And I want to say thank you to everybody who sent in a photo. I know how, God, you really got to put yourself out there to potentially have a photo selected to be reviewed in an online forum such as YouTube. It's not an easy thing to do. You definitely have to kind of put your ego at the door a little bit because possibly somebody could tear it apart or love it. You just never know what someone is going to say. And hopefully I didn't tear any of these photos apart. I thought they were all absolutely fantastic, but I picked those photos for a very specific reason because I felt that there was something that I would change that could possibly help other people when it comes to possibly cropping their photos a different way, or just overall editing their images. So I do hope that you are able to get at least one helpful piece of information out of this week's video. And as always, if you have any questions about anything covered here today, please leave those in the comments section below and I will get back in touch with you as soon as possible. And if you did enjoy this week's video, if you could, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And as always, I really do appreciate you checking out this week's video, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.